This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you by the Renewed Spirits event, an evening with Elizabeth Smart at the Marriott Conference Center in Florence, Alabama on September 28, 2021. You may remember that Elizabeth Smart was set to graduate middle school in 2002 when she was abducted from her home in Salt Lake City, Utah, and held captive by a husband and wife. She was chained to a tree in a campsite just miles from her home and endured atrocities. However, this was a rare horror story with a happy ending, as the clues led to her safe return less than a year after her disappearance. Elizabeth will be sharing her story of hope, healing, and never giving up. Through this traumatic experience, Elizabeth has become an advocate for change related to child abduction, recovery programs, and national legislation. Elizabeth triumphantly testified before her captor and the world about the very private nightmare she suffered during her abduction, which led to conviction. General admission is $50 per person. Sponsorships are also available. Call 256-335-4062 for more information or check out the links in the show notes. Proceeds from this event will benefit Renewed Spirits, a nonprofit that offers quality mental health services to underserved clients. Renewed Spirits will defer to local, state, and national guidance if COVID-19 cases dictate in September. We plan to be at half capacity, and masks will be required to attend the event.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis, and of course, Will Mahan along with us. And once again, we are joined with our good friend, Tabitha Morris from the Maryville, Tennessee area. Is it Maryville or Maryville?
Well, correctly pronounced, it's Maryville.
There you go. That's what I thought. So
they'll know you're not from there if you say it the other way.
Maryville, we go, oh, you're a foreigner.
Yeah, it's like Fayetteville Festival.
That's right.
Yeah.
You say Fayetteville, they know you're not from around here.
You ain't from here. Well, we are thankful to have you with us again on the podcast to talk about some things. Hope that you're doing well today and that the rest of you guys are doing okay, but we thoroughly enjoyed our visit with you as we were talking about some various things about the change that came over you when Christ came into your life, and that's a huge blessing for all of us, as that change is an important part of each one of us that are talking, and hopefully it is to those who are listening to the podcast that they've experienced that as well. And because of that, you became a preacher. We kind of talked a little bit about how that it transformed you, but you had the same personality that went headlong into anything that you were doing, and it just kind of transformed, sort of like Paul and Peter. They were going at everything that they were doing with 100%, and you did the same thing with your Christianity, and that's how we met.
Yes.
We met because you were a minister at the Second Creek congregation. I almost said Pine Hill because I was at Pine Hill about the same time.
Yep.
And so you were a minister there. And during that time, I dated a young lady from the Second Creek congregation that some folks have heard me talk about a time or two. And Travis, I think you dated a young lady from the Second Creek congregation for just a little bit, didn't you?
I think that was more of a camp thing.
Okay.
And she got smart fast, right?
Romance.
Yeah, she got smart. Like by the time the week was over, she got tired of hearing about professional wrestling and football, and she's ready to move on pretty quick. But yeah, that's throwback, Ben. That's a throwback.
I threw you under the bus real quick.
It's all right. All right.
And Will's got some connection. He didn't know till we were talking about this a little bit earlier to the family in Second Creek. There's a couple of Geans that are up there, and that's the connection that we had. The Mackie and Linda Gean also are some family members of Will Mahan. And so I've told the story before on the podcast. It may be a ways back. Somebody may have to dig into some of our older podcasts to find it. But when I was a student at Freed-Hardeman University, it was in 1999. I was a sophomore, and that September, the girl that I was dating that Danny worked at the congregation there in Second Creek. She was killed in a car accident, and probably one of those darker periods in my life. But as we've talked about how things transform us in this podcast, and I've mentioned this before, it was a time a lot of transformation for me, because it was I went through some counseling during that time, and as a result ended up deciding that was at least part of what I wanted to do as well. I was already working in ministry, but I wanted to do a little bit to help other people. As we talk about, when you go through something, it qualifies you to help other people through it. And so I sort of decided to try to do that. But we wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit, Danny, because you were very connected to the congregation at Second Creek, and I know that you walked with them through this grief.
Yeah, I was trying to help others through grief as I was trying to process it myself.
Sure.
You
were very close to her.
Yes, Tabitha was my sidekick. If we went anywhere or did anything, she was right there in the seat beside me. We were just super close. She would bring me cookies that she made. She was always one of the sweetest people I ever met in my life. Just full of love. Loved her family. Loved the Lord. Oh, she had a passion for the Lord, and loved me. I mean, she just treated me like I was somebody special the whole time I knew her. And so, yeah, it was, I've preached, I've lost count of how many funerals I've preached. Well over 100. I remember her funeral like I preached it yesterday. And I can't say that about any other funeral. I've preached family member funerals. I've preached people I don't even know funerals. And I can't remember hardly anything about any of them. But I remember that funeral like I preached it yesterday. There's not a day goes by I don't think that I don't think about Tabitha at some point in time. Happy to my soul. That was her phrase. And so I insert that. I insert that in hymns as we're singing them. Instead of singing the words that are written, I go, happy to my soul, or to my soul, whatever. So yeah, she still lives in my heart every single day. I've never let go of her.
She left quite an impact on a lot of people,
She
I
did.
believe. And with that, you, as you said, you were processing your grief. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of people don't understand is preachers may seem like machines, but we're not. I mean, we have to kind of be there in those moments when people are hurting.
Yes.
But we're hurting too. And that's kind of can be somewhat of an interesting balance.
You said something to me, and you probably don't even remember saying it, but you said something to me right after that funeral. You said, because I broke down in the funeral. I don't know how much of it you remember, but I was crying during the funeral myself, trying to get the words out and choking on them during the funeral. And you came up to me afterwards and you said, "If Danny Morris can cry, I know I can cry too." And we embraced right then, and we both cried. But that was one of the most beautiful things anybody's ever said to me. I've never even mentioned it to you, but I'll never forget it. Never forget anything about that day. I remember people that were there that I was, people from Freed-Hardeman had come down to the funeral. And I remember all the people that were there. If you remember, it was in the Savannah Church of Christ building. They had to open the basement up and put cameras in. And I mean, it was just an amazing crowd. I don't guess I've ever gotten all my grief out over that. That's probably why I continue to think about her and refuse to let go of my love for her. Is that I've just never gotten over it.
If anything, you can take from that, young people who might be listening, you do have influence. I don't know that I've ever seen the influence of a young person like that person. I've never heard anybody, and obviously she had flaws. She's a human being. Never heard anybody utter a word of negativity, and you saw it that day. You saw it, and of course we know of examples of people who gave their life to the Lord after the loss of her life. And I mean, just packed to the rafters. I mean, if you can pack a church to the rafters, it was done.
It was done.
And like you said, the Freed-Hardeman. And so, you know, to see the influence of a person who was so young, but as, you know, connecting to our previous episode, was all in.
Just wanted to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about one of our sponsors, M2Y. The Ministering to Youth Conference is located at the Mainstay Suites in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee on November the 4th through the 7th. If you want a place where you'll be surrounded by youth ministers, elders, deacons, preachers, youth volunteers, and parents, all with a common goal of helping today's youth, then this is the place for you. This year's theme is Renew. The keynote speakers are Dan Chambers and Spencer Furby, along with several other class teachers who will be teaching on subjects like self-care, navigating culture, technology, mental health, and so much more. If you're interested in this, go to m2yconference.com to register, or you can go to benandtravis.com/m2y for more information. We hope to see you there this year.
We have questions, we have things, and once again, last part, we don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know why things like this happen. But I do know that we have a God who walks with us in it. And maybe you can speak to that.
When I used the quote from the book of Philippians that was Ben and Tabitha's favorite scripture passage, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you. In my grief, I never blamed God, never questioned God. Knew that she was in a much better place. Knew that she was where she always wanted to be, anyways. Reunited with her grandmother. I had that comfort. But in spite of having the knowledge, the assurance of her faith and love for the Lord, in spite of having that, there was an immediate void that I could not figure out how to feel. I put my trust in the Lord, said, Lord, I know I can make it through this. She's someone I love. She's someone I've lost. I know, I just don't know. I don't know what to put there. It's like compartmentalizing. I do my best not to compartmentalize, but there was a compartment in my life that was empty. And I struggled trying to fill that. For a while there, I didn't want to preach anymore. I didn't. It's not that I didn't love the Lord. It's not that I didn't love preaching. I didn't want to do it anymore. That's how bad I was hurting. And if you know me, you know how much I love to teach and preach. You know that was a weird thing for me to experience, and that I guess that may have been part of the void. There is just not having the desire, and so. That's one of the reasons why I stepped back and went to school full time, was because I couldn't think of anything to preach.
You mentioned that you were never angry at God. I was. So I think and it's one of those things where I've helped other people with grief afterwards, because they feel guilty. They feel upset that they're angry with God, and I've used the statement, God's big enough to handle our emotions, and God's big enough to handle whatever we throw at him. And this isn't his first rodeo with loss.
I tell people all the time, it's not wrong to be angry with God.
Yeah,
God understands anger. God created anger. He has anger. It's an emotion. We're shaped and formed in His image. We do things with it that obviously He does not. So it's how we deal with it, how we use it. But
which way do we turn with it? Do we turn our anger toward Him and speak to Him about it,
right?
Or do we turn our anger and turn away from Him? And I think that's the key. Is Job was angry, but he turned to God and said, "Why?" Like he never doubted God. It was just, I want to know why this happened. And he,
Yeah,
he had that conversation with him.
I think it's a form of belief. It can be. I think it can be a form of belief. Anybody that I have a relationship with, Ben, I'm close to you. Will, I'm getting closer. You're in our text group, and y'all get all kinds of crazy stuff from me. But it's because I believe our relationship can handle it. I feel like I can communicate my life a certain way, because our relationship can handle it.
One thing for me is the role that you were in, being the minister, the one that's, we're looked at times to be the stable ones, the ones that are the shoulders to lean on and everything else. And I think a lot of times we probably put more on our shoulders than what we should. But what are some practical ways, not just even to ministers, but just to people, that when I lose someone that I'm grieving, but I'm also considered the stable one or the one that's supposed to provide that comfort, how do you walk through those moments?
I think the first thing you have to realize is that nothing you say is going to make a difference. You can talk, well, the Lord this and the Lord that, and that's fine and good. You can talk about your own personal experience, but when it comes right down to that person's grief, nothing you say is going to make a difference. They're going to grieve and they're going to hurt, and they're just going to have to go through the process. So it's basically the same as visiting someone who's terminally ill in the hospital. If you go into a hospital where everybody knows that person is not coming out of the hospital, including the person laying there. Yeah. So what do? You go in there and you say, you want to have a prayer today? Sure, let's have a prayer. Okay, let's make them as comfortable as we can. But really, it doesn't change the situation, doesn't change the environment. But the fact that you're there is what makes the difference. It's presence. It's unspoken love and support that I think goes further than anything. I was there when Mackie went in to identify Tabitha. I was there when he saw her, right after the accident. I couldn't think of anything to say. There was no way to first of all describe how I was feeling, and then to try to understand how he was feeling, because my daughter's basically the same age as her, a year or two older, something like that. So I just put my arm around his shoulder and held on to him, just to let him know that I was there. If he wanted to cry, I let him cry. If he wanted to scream, I let him scream. He didn't scream, but I'm just saying, if he wanted to, I was there to let him do it and not judge him for it.
And I don't know if you knew this, but kind of going with that is, in the moment you're doing that, I'm in the car with your wife and thinking I'm going to die because she's driving 150 miles an hour. But she came to the dorm. I was in Faro. She came there and sort of relayed the message to Phil Dean, who came into our room and told me, and I kind of went numb at that point. We went out to the car. She drove me, and I don't remember if we even talked, but she was there, and I'll never forget. She was the one who took me to the hospital.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I remember that now, but yeah.
So I can't remember a word she said, but I can remember that she was the one that took me.
The temptation is to say something. Well, when your job is to say something, the pressure is really high. And so, that's something you learn, any young minister out there, fight that urge with everything you've got, unless and even when they ask specifically for something, even then they're not really, they're not looking for a theological debate over what's going on. The time for talking will come. Fight that urge. And I appreciate you sharing that moment, but knowing that, if he can be emotional and these guys can be emotional, then I can be emotional. And I don't know that I was quite ready for that at 18 years old, but I'm there now, and I appreciate the example that I saw of people who were just there for each other.
Our relationship, the three of us, and now that Will's been adopted into the family, him too, I have felt a bond with you two guys basically since day one. Y'all are never out of my thoughts, ever. I told you I think about Tabitha every day. I think about you guys every day too. There's anchors in your life. and memories in your life that you always hold on to. I don't ever have to call y'all up and say, hey, Travis, I love you, buddy. Bye. I don't have to say that because
Yeah.
At least you better know.
I do.
That I love you and being the same way and will too. Now, uncommunicated fellowship.
Well, I think that's ultimately the beauty of the church.
Yes,
is
exactly.
that, you would never know that the four of us had not sat down and had a conversation for me and you ever, and for you and Ben and Travis years, because the beauty of it is you pick back up, because of the bond that you have through the church.
Exactly.
It really is a beautiful thing.
And people say things like this, but it's been a half a lifetime ago, literally.
Yeah.
Because I'm 41.
You didn't have to say that.
I know, but I was 19. 19 and 20 when that happened.
Yeah.
Somebody the other day was talking about the Twin Towers, and 9/11, and they said I can remember half of my life was spent before that big moment.
Yeah.
And half of my life has been spent after that moment. And I'm at that same place. It was about halfway point of my life at this point, that I can remember 20 years before the towers fell and 20 years after the towers fell. And it's the same thing with this. It was such a big moment in my life. Any other particular things about helping the church or helping ministers as they go through that?
I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I asked me to preach a sermon, no problem. Asked me to give a lecture, teach a Bible class, any subject, give it to me. I'm gone. I'll get up there and do it. Dealing with something like that, there's not a book on that. There's not a recipe for that. And so you basically, you have to know your people. You have to know the congregation. And the congregations come together at times like that. It's our people are the most amazing people in the world. I have never, ever seen a congregation challenged to where they did not only meet the challenge, but gone above and beyond the challenge. And it's happened over and over and over again in my lifetime as a minister, as a preacher. So in times like that, that's exactly what family does. They come together. They're there for each other. They, provide food. They provide, people go in there and clean their house for them, whatever they can think of to do for them at that particular time to help them process whatever it is they're going through. It's just like a sickness or, a death that's not as sudden as Tabitha's was. And so, I wished I had a recipe saying, if you do this, this, and this, and this, then the congregation will be great and everything will be fine. But there's not one. It's one of those situations to where every situation is different. And you just kind of have to let it go through its course. Sometimes preachers have the idea that this is what I want this church to be, so I'm going to push them until they're there. And those guys don't last very long.
And what I hear when you say that is relationships.
Yes.
I mean, relationships are key.
Yes.
And you had one with Tabitha. You had one with the church family there. You still do. We had relationships. And the reason that you made such an impact on us was because of that relationship. And you knew how to build those relationships and encourage people. And I think, it really goes back to that idea. And I've told a lot of ministers that people will put up with a lot from you if they really, truly believe that you love them. And that's
perfect example right here. Perfect example right here. Because you go back and you talk to all the, if I have a claim to fame, it's that every place I've left, they've said, you don't have to leave. And you can always come back.
I think they said about Jack Zorn in the funeral. I think Lonnie Jones actually said it in a video at his funeral. Said it wasn't about how many people loved Jack Zorn. It was about how many people believed that Jack Zorn loved them. And that's so huge for any kind of ministry. It's so huge for just life in general. Just love people. Love them enough not to leave them where they're at, but, love them and help them to get to the place that you want them to be.
Exactly.
That God
It opens the door. It opens the door for them to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, I really believe that congregation could have been completely honest with you, or you know, the Geans. I'm sure it wasn't like, oh well, he's the minister, he's the preacher, he's up here and we're down here. We didn't get that. And so for those who are grieving, when you have a relationship with them, they feel like they can be honest about what they need.
Yeah.
Hey, I just need you to leave me alone right now, or hey, I need a meal, or I need this, or I need that. You know, I can remember sitting in 7th floor Huntsville Hospital and some of my best friends there and me just having to be honest. Hey, guys, you can stay here all day. I'd love to wake up and you be here, but I've got to go to sleep. Like I can't keep my eyes open for another 2 minutes. And so, but that relationship there that you can be honest and, you know, that's comforting in itself, that I can be a complete mess of emotion and grief. And I know you're not going to be scared of that. You're not going to run the other direction.
I'm here to serve. I'll serve you any way I can serve you. And if serving you means going away and leaving you alone for a little while, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Tell me what you want me to do. Don't expect me to read your mind. You know,
and I think that's my point in that is like, I think if some people think, well, they, you know, later on, well, they didn't do this. Well, did you tell them that's what you wanted? You know, because I'm thick-skulled. I need somebody to go, this is what I want, and this is how I would like it. And I will do my dead level best to make that happen. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but I'll do my best. But yeah, I think you nailed it. You know, we're not mind readers. We don't have a special power. We don't know if we're getting on your nerves, especially me, right, Ben?
Right.
You know,
no,
but,
I know when you get on my
you know, so let us know. We would prefer you be gentle, but if you're not into feeling gentle, then let us have it, because we'd much rather honor your feelings and what you need than to completely get it wrong. But we will get it wrong in the effort of trying to be a servant unless you let us know.
On one of the congregations I was preaching, this brother was walking out of work and had a massive heart attack and died before he got to his car. Of course, they took him to the hospital, hooked him up to everything. And we set up for, I think, 2 nights straight, seeing if that he might pull through, but there was not a chance he was going to pull through. He was dead before they got him to the car. But anyways, spent all those hours, and his wife asked me to stand beside her while they unplugged him, and, you know, went through that whole process. It was brutal, but I stood there. I didn't say a word, put my arm around her, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, and you know, it was what it was, and it was what it was supposed to be. The following Sunday, the father of that gentleman, he was much older, walked out, grabbed my hand, and looked at me dead in the eye and said, "You haven't done a single thing for this congregation since you've been here." I've been there for 2 years. And I just held his daughter-in-law's hand while they unplugged her husband, his son. And he said that to me one Sunday, the following Sunday morning, after I preached. And I was stunned. And the people that were standing around, I mean, there was like 4 or 5 people standing there, and they always, you know, just couldn't believe it. But he was grieving.
Yeah.
He didn't mean what he said. He was striking out because of his grief.
At the safest person he could find to strike
Exactly.
out at.
He couldn't say that to anybody else in the congregation, or anything like that to anybody else in the congregation, but he was able to say it to me.
Well,
And I don't know. I don't know whatever. I don't know that I ever did anything to particularly hurt his feelings, or, you know, if I was just there at the right place at the right time. But I remember that.
Sure.
And it was hurtful, but I didn't let it stop me from loving him, because I knew what he was going through.
I've tried to in my years now that I've done counseling, is I tell people when those sorts of things happen, think about what's behind the words, because it's probably not anything to do with you.
Exactly.
And I've had people say similar things to me, and then I realized they were having a bad day. There was something going on with them. You go to help a dog that's been hit by a car, it's going to bite you, even if you're trying to help it.
Even if you're trying to help, yeah.
And a lot of times because you're just the closest body to it. And I think people lash out sometimes with their family or at their ministers because they perceive it to be the safest place to lash out. And later on, they'll probably regret that or come talk to you about it even. I've had them come apologize after doing it, but they needed it at that moment. And if we can learn as ministers not to take everything that's said to us to heart, and, I think that helps us in the long run.
I learned early in my ministry that you have to be like a duck.
Let it roll
Just let it roll off.
Well, I guess I will ask a fun question. I'm going to ask you if you've got a pretty good story that you don't mind sharing, especially if you got one about Ben, okay? But if you got one of both of us, we'll have patience and we'll let you tell it. But do you have one?
I've got one, and Ben's heard me tell it many times, I think. And it goes back to the Tabitha days. We were at a youth rally over there in Florence somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was. Of course, him and Tabitha were all holding hands and being all cute and everything. You know how they were. And it came time for us to leave. And Ben walked around in front of the van. And I think I blew my horn. Beep! Get over here and kiss that girl goodbye.
Yeah.
Well, Ben's eyes got about that. Do what? I said, you don't kiss that girl goodbye when you leave her? He said, well, yeah. I said, well, then get over there and kiss her goodbye. So
not in front of a van full of people, I did.
I was doing everything I could to embarrass him. So I think he did get over a little smooch on the cheek or something and then went off. I don't know of two men in this world that I think more highly of than these two guys right here. Will, I'm honored to meet you. I'm so proud that we know some beautiful people together. Mm-hmm. But listen, if I ever grow up, I want to be like these two guys right here. Now, the chances of me growing up are pretty slim.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.